WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. I've been wearing suits and, having fun. My wife even, ironed a bunch of my stuff for me on Sunday night. And I said, I'm going to get, all dressed up, and I'm going to, fix everything. And I thought, these are the last couple of sports conversations we're going to have for a little while. So I busted out the old pink and purple hat, going Ravens old school. I think this is the hat I wore in Denver when Joe Flacco threw the Mile High Miracle. And I broke out the old sweatshirt because I'm having Mike Flynn on this week to talk about his kid's Broadway production. And we're doing all sorts of educational stuff. So I will shave, I will tailor up, I will get fixed up. But right now, I'm going to roll my sleeves up and go old school, WNST.net, Baltimore sports. And welcome Luke Jones in for a rare football conversation. I don't know how many more of these we're going to be having. I certainly don't know about baseball, Luke, but from the sports perspective, it was quite a weekend haul for the Purple Birds, who across the board were once again lauded, applauded, and feted for having won yet another draft. And that goes a long way when you're already 14-2 to begin with, right?
Sure. I'll also say this. The Ravens usually win the draft this time of year. I mean, perception is just, it's there. You can go back and find after the 2015 draft, and people were praising drafting Brashad Perriman and Max Williams. So we know that ultimately what these guys do on the field is really what tells a story. That's why I kind of laugh at the concept of draft grades right after it happens. But if you're talking in terms of maximizing value, in terms of taking players at spots that made sense, I think there was very little to question about this. I think we could certainly get into JK Dobbins in the second round, a running back there, when you already had a record-setting running game last year.
Well, there's always one of those, right? There's always one of those in the first couple rounds where they take somebody and you're like, well, that didn't fill the circle and the square, and
Sure.
and the years where they have done that, I'll take the wide receiver, Brashad Perriman, or whatever that need is. I'm at the point now where 23 years in, people want me, and Dennis and I are going to talk, and I know we'll be talking with other people. Eric Edholm's going to be here this week. Lance Zierlein's going to be here. People want to pick apart all sorts of things. The Ravens draft's one of those things where it's like, I just know they're better at it than you and I are, right?
I mean, we could say that about anything. I mean, if we're going to say that, then there's nothing to debate, I mean, but your point is well taken in the sense that, especially the last couple of years, you look at what they've been able to do, I think there's very little to question. I mean, and going back to JK Dobbins, because we might as well, because we've talked about Patrick Queen at this point,
sure,
and get into the rest of the draft picks. So when you're talking about a running back at 55th overall, I think there's a general question in this day and age with what we know about the running game compared to the passing game, what we know about what really drives a running game. And I think in the Ravens' case, it's Lamar Jackson, period, and then it's everything else. And I don't say that with any disrespect to their offensive line or to Mark Ingram or Gus Edwards, but you're talking about a quarterback that averaged nearly 7 yards per carry last year. So he's the driving force. So I think, and knowing that the Ravens run the ball the way they do, I certainly can hear and agree with the argument that they're going to value a running back a little bit more than the typical pass-happy team of 2020 will. But I'll say this, if you're going to ask me if I think J.K. Dobbins makes the 2020 Ravens dramatically better, I'm not going to tell you that I agree with that. What I do like about J.K. Dobbins is 2021 and beyond. And that's not to say he won't contribute this year. In fact, my prediction with kind of looking at what these guys will do immediately, he probably slides into somewhere between Gus Edwards and Mark Ingram in terms of carries. I think he'll have more carries than Gus Edwards had last year, which was, I believe, 122. But I think if you're looking at Dobbins in terms of just the immediate future, in terms of 2020, assuming there's a season, and it's and we don't know that right now, but if we're talking about it in the immediate future, it reminds me a little bit of, okay, the best hitter in your team hits 340, will be better if he hits 360 next year. I just don't know how you can expect the running game to be that much better than it already was last year when they averaged 5.5 yards.
Well, I think it having more bodies. I mean, I would start with someone gets injured, someone's out for 2 weeks, someone's out for a month. That someone might be number 8, right? Like, literally, you have to think in those terms. And the more manpower and the more guys you have to run the football. I mean, this is not the Jamal Lewis era, right? Like, literally, it's not a one-guy thing, and it wasn't a one-guy thing with Mark Ingram either, really.
Sure. And there's always the merit of talking about depth. But again, if you're talking about what they could have done to move the meter a little bit more for 2020, you certainly could argue going in a couple other directions. But that said, again, bringing back the point of the draft is the long term. The draft is the long view. It's not just about 2020. I think a great example here, and it ties in nicely, is the Ravens drafted Ray Rice in 2008 at 55th overall. Same exact spot in the draft. Ray Rice wasn't a dramatic contributor in his rookie season. He contributed, and he had some nice moments, and certainly before he, I think, hurt his shin or calf, whatever it was, late in that season, he was really coming on. But where did that pick really pay off? It was 2009 and beyond. So I think JK Dobbins fits that mold a little bit more. But to your point, if Mark Ingram goes down, even though, let's not forget, Gus Edwards averaged 5.3 yards per carry last year as well, so it's not like they had a stiff as the backup. But if we're talking in terms of 2021, Mark Ingram will be on the wrong side of 30, 31 years old at that point. He's scheduled to make $5 million next season. And I think, for me, one of the most profound moments of the weekend for the Ravens had nothing to do with the Ravens, actually. Take a look at the money that Laramie Tunsil got from the Houston Texans to re-up. A long-term deal. He's comfortably over $20 million per year. Well, guess who was paying attention to that? Ronnie Stanley. So it's a reminder of some of the just massive contracts the Ravens are going to have to give out over the next couple years. Stanley, of course, Lamar Jackson, and maybe Marlon Humphrey isn't the highest paid corner in the league, but he's going to be really close to it because of his age and because of what he's already done at this point.
And we know what corners get paid. I mean,
exactly. So when you think about it in terms of that, that's where you look at a JK Dobbins draft pick and say, okay, maybe he's not making them dramatically better right now, but that makes it that much easier to move on from Mark Ingram next year, and he looks like the kind of back who, of course, very accomplished. I like the player. I want to be very clear about this. This isn't anti-JK Dobbins. It's in terms of maximizing value for year one of JK Dobbins, where we'll see. But I do like it very much so for 2021, 2022, and 23, where he looks like he could be the guy that he could be what Mark Ingram was last year, and be a younger version of that. And but to your overall point, of course, the Ravens need a stable of running backs. It's just a case of also reminding yourself there's only one football. You can't have two running backs carry the ball on the same play. So when you already have Lamar Jackson who runs the ball a lot, and should Lamar carry it less? We've debated that. We'll continue to debate that, but he's what makes this running game truly special. It's not anyone else. It's him. So anytime you're suggesting he runs it a little bit less, then unless J.K. Dobbins is the next Jim Brown, and maybe he will be an all-pro running back and be that special of a talent. But again, I'm just going to come back to it and say it's really tough to say something that's so special as it is to try to make it that much better. And that's just what my point is in the short-term future. Long-term, over the next 3 to 4 years, I have no problem with J.K. Dobbins, and I think he's a nice fit because he ran very effectively out of the shotgun in the pistol at Ohio State.
Luke Jones is here. He is Baltimore Luke. You can find him out on Twitter. We're doing the sports thing here. We're going to get back to a bunch of educators and Baltimore positive stuff throughout the week and throughout the pandemic. But you said something that I find to be fascinating, that I took notice of. The draft is the long view. And when I think to myself, this is the only sort of weekend of the year that long view is really taken into account, other than even contracts where you look and say, well, Mark Ingram won't be around to collect that money in the last year of whatever said deal will be, in the same way that whatever Marlon Humphrey gets from the Lions 2 years from now, he won't be around in 2028 to collect it. But the long view of the draft is that it is the weekend that you really are thinking of 2023 and 24 and what your team's going to look like, not just this year, because that's what free agency is about, and that's what every week's about in the league, right? Like, once a season gets started, I don't give a damn whether, Eric Weddle's going to be on the team 3 years from now. What is he doing this Sunday for me? That's all the coaches care about. There's only right here, right now, most of the time in the league. And for most of the executives, there's no 2023 or 24, because if they're 4-12 this year, they're gone. And so this organization does think differently, where they take a running back who looks like the fourth or fifth running back right now, and DeCosta keeps talking about undefendable, and I'll let you get to that, but this is a different organization in that way, that they do look long view, and specifically this organization.
Yeah, and this goes back to what you said at the beginning. That's why they have been so successful with the draft over the years, in understanding that it isn't just about this year. And let's be very clear, that's not to say they're not thinking about 2020 when they make their draft picks. Patrick Queen's going to be he's going to be a starting inside linebacker. I'd be shocked if he's not starting. If he's not starting, they probably have issues that he's not nearly the player that they thought he was.
Well, you would always say in the 90s when the team came here, when you draft Dwayne Starks, he's got to get on the field. Like that would be, if you're a first-round pick, you got to get on the field, sure. And maybe that's part of Hayden Hurst's, when they look at productivity for him over 2 years, to say he didn't get on the field, and he didn't, he did not have that kind of productivity that over 23 years you look at the Mark Claytons or we can go through the names of the guys that didn't work out so great, but most of the time it begins with, did they get on the field in the beginning, and are they accelerating into playing, let's say, the way a C.J. Mosley did, right?
Right, and that's typically how you view first-round picks. You mentioned Hayden Hurst. It just so happened that Mark Andrews was really the first-round pick that year compared to Hayden Hurst in terms of what they were. But when you're looking at the draft in general, and again, this is a strong generalization. There's always going to be some outliers and exceptions, but you're looking at your first-round pick to play and play a lot in year one. Typically, you're looking at your first-round pick to be a starter from day one or somewhere soon within that first season. Your second and third round picks are guys that you're hoping don't have to start day one, and certainly JK Dobbins, I don't think he's unseating Mark Ingram week one. Now, maybe by week 13, he is the guy, because I do think he's a heck of a talent at the running back position. Justin Matabuki, their first of 4 third-round picks, he's not going to start this year. He's not going to start over Brandon Williams, Calais Campbell, and Derek Wolfe.
But you're going to have fun saying his name every time.
Yeah, but I tell you where he could factor in, it's as a pass rush rotational kind of guy, because he gives you some juice from an inside position. And you and I have talked a lot about the fact that they haven't really had a defensive tackle in recent years. Timmy Jernigan for a minute maybe, but you kind of have to go back to Haloti Ngata to really find a defensive tackle they had that could give you much as a pass rusher. So I think Matabuki, while he's not going to start from day one, he certainly could be a starter by next year when you consider those 3 starters are all 30 or older.
Well, that's a semi-unusual trait, isn't it, right? That's a John Randall-y kind of trait.
Yeah, typically you have, and that was kind of where Timmy Jernigan was. He could rush the passer a little bit, but not the strongest fit against the run game. So to find that guy that can be both, that you typically don't find those guys hitting the market. There are some exceptions, but those are typically the guys you need to draft and develop. And I mean, the Ravens they've had run stoppers. I mean, Brandon Williams, Michael Pierce.
They've made a lot of money for a lot of people in the offensive line. Not to mention all the money Ray Lewis used to make for guys. Every year he'd throw somebody out into the market at top of class. I mean, if you get drafted into this organization, that is one of the parts of this. Is you would look at it and say that they've made a lot of Kelechi Osemele's and Ryan Jensen's and Ricky Wagner's wealthy men recently.
Yeah, and on the flip side, they haven't signed a ton of guys like that where. I mean, you just mentioned Ryan Jensen, for example. Look, Ryan Jensen ended up being a really nice success story, but let's not pretend that he was a major contributor for his first few years with the Ravens. He was a guy that was kind of a fringe player on the roster and a backup.
Well, that would be the same of Matt Judon, right? I mean, that would be
sure.
Yeah,
and you just haven't seen the Ravens necessarily sign as much as what you just said. They go and other guys they'll make money elsewhere. You haven't necessarily seen the Ravens sign a ton of those pop-up guys. I mean, Tony Jefferson kind of comes to mind, and that didn't work out so great when you consider how much money they paid him. But the point is, bringing it back to, I was talking about Matabuki, is you want some guys that, you want them to contribute for 2020. There's no question about that. And Patrick Queen's going to do that. I think Matabuki, from a rotational standpoint, has a good chance to do that. I've already mentioned Dobbins. Dobbins will be in the mix. I'm not saying he's not going to carry the ball. Clearly, he'll be a part of what they do. I think Malik Harrison, later in the third round, he's a guy that probably profiles more as a two-down inside linebacker. And Queen will be the guy that's on the field every single play. But I think Malik Harrison's got a chance to start this year. So when you're talking about second and third round guys, typically, you're not going to plug them into the starting lineup, but that doesn't mean they can't be into that starting role right away. And certainly, you're hoping that they can contribute. And then you get later into the draft. That's when you're talking more about your developmental types, guys that are going to play on special teams, guys that are going to be some quality depth for you, and you need that. So I think from that standpoint. Yeah, they added some pieces that are going to help them in 2020. But where I really like this draft is what they've set themselves up for beyond that. Because as I mentioned with Stanley and Lamar Jackson and Humphrey, and at some point in time, then you're talking about Mark Andrews and what do you do with Orlando Brown? I mean, they've got a lot of really young, cheap, talented players right now that in a couple years. They'll still be young, but they're not going to be cheap anymore. So what that means is you're going to have to make some sacrifices elsewhere. And some of the veterans on this team right now who, Calais Campbell wasn't going to be on this team in 3 years anyway. I mean, that's just how this works. Mark Ingram not going to be on this team in a couple years anyway, but guys that are replacing them probably going to have to be on the cheap because you're going to be paying some silly money to some of the Ravens' young stars. So that's where it's important to hit on some of these guys.
Because you were so good at drafting the last time you had a chance to take the Patrick Queen kid, right? Who turned out to be Humphrey or Stanley or, to your point, the kid with the gas mask was a kid they could have had that everybody wanted until the gas mask showed up. They would have had to pay him less this week if he were around, right?
Right. I mean, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, you want to have to pay your young stars. If you're never paying those guys, it tells you that you probably haven't done a tremendous job.
You want to pay everybody but Joe Flacco. Just ask the fans, right?
But that's where you look at this draft. And look, this time of year, every single NFL city in America right now is talking about, other than probably Green Bay and Philadelphia, because just talking about decisions made with backup quarterbacks of the future.
Oh, we'll get to that,
Yeah, we will. But my point is, everyone loves their draft this time of year, and time will ultimately tell. And look, the Ravens drafted 10 guys. They didn't hit on 10 guys. They didn't hit on 9 guys. They didn't hit on 8 guys. But if they hit on 4 or 5 or 6 to varying degrees, and assuming at least 2 or 3 of those are starting caliber players, then boy, you're talking about a draft that is going to help you prolong that window once you're paying Lamar Jackson whatever he's going to make, $40 million a year, whatever it might end up being. Once you're paying Ronnie Stanley $23 million a year. Once you're paying Marlon Humphrey top 5 cornerback money. As many of those holes that you can plug with cheaper young talent, you're just going to make yourself that much more likely to continue to contend for championships. So that's really, that's what the draft is really about. It's not, you want help right away, and you're hoping your earliest draft picks will do that. But you get into those day 2 and day 3 guys, it really is much more about 2021 and beyond, and whatever you get from them in their rookie year, that's gravy.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke. You can find him, Luke, at WNST.net. All of our WNST sponsors. I paid a visit this weekend with my mask, with my gloves, to see my son for the first time in 6 weeks. And, of course, got over to the east side of town. So I saw all of our sponsors. I went to Pizza John's. You'll see me eating some pizza this week with pepperoni on it as well. Stopped and saw Chad the Crab Man down at Al's. I got some shrimp. My wife and I are working up some shrimp Veracruz to honor Julio Bermejo because we missed our trip to San Francisco last week. So big shout out to Chad for that, as well as the crab cake. I had a little crab Benedict on Sunday. Delicious. I fry it up. So when I make a crab cake at home, no one wants to see what that looks like because it's not pretty. I fry it up. I grease it up a little bit. It's better in my belly than it looks on the internet. I stopped by Icy Delights. I saw Bill. Icy Delights is there. Egg custard. I don't know how many we're going to get this year. Masks, 6 feet. Taking care of sponsors. We also stopped at King Discount Liquors. Paid tribute to the late, great Johnny Bev. I don't know that I've ever spent more money at King Discount Liquors than I did. My wife was like, we need this chocolate liqueur. Boom. We need this wine. Boom. This is on sale. Boom. Let's get a case of beer. Let's do that. Man, quarantine. Booze drinking's up in this country. I'm not going to lie to you. But a big thanks to King Discount Liquors. Love them, appreciate them, and I want to send love to all of Johnny Bev's friends and family on his tragic passing. We also stopped down at Costas. And by the way, I had the Key Brewing folks on. They're right around the corner from Costas, down at Sparrows Point by the Country Club. And they have a Rofo coffee stout. I don't have it in here. I do not have it in my Cole Roofing mug right now either. But I do have a 6-pack of the Rofo stout. So there, Dundalk, Rofo, stout. And I stopped by and I saw Pete. And he gave me a giant quart of cream of crab soup with big crab lumps on top. And then he gave me that crazy spinach that they make. It's like a spinach pie filling, but it's not as cheesy, but it's a different kind of cheesy. And he put some sort of liqueur in there that sweetens it up. And he gave it to me like raw. He's like, you want it hot or you want it cold? I'm like, I want it cold. And then I put it in the oven at 450 and it baked up all bubbly. It's really good. Costas. They'll ship the crab cakes to you. We have great sponsors on the east side of town. They've been with us for years. They're all open. I saw it with my own. I saw the line at Al's Seafood in Essex. 6 feet apart. 2 in the store. Pick up a 6-pack. Pick up some shrimp for the road. Take care of our sponsors. They take care of us. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST.net. More with Luke. More on the draft. More sports. And a little more Baltimore positive, too. Because it's good for you.